All right, so now we're going to solve by factoring. And when we solve factors, we are finding the zeros, roots, or solutions. That's going to be where the graph or the graph of the equation crosses the x-axis. Okay, that's where it crosses the x-axis. All right, and here's 2 QR codes if you would like to watch those as well. All right, the zero product rule. Remember, when you're multiplying a times b, that's equal to 0. That's going to imply that either a equals 0 or b equals 0, or both could possibly equal 0. And with knowing that information, let's apply that. So what we're going to do to find our zeros, to find our roots, to find our solutions, we're going to set each one of these 2 equal to 0. So we're going to go x equals 0 and x plus 7 equals 0. And solving each of those, that one's already solved. Subtract 7, x equals negative 7. So your zeros would be 0 and negative 7. Okay, so if that were to be graphed, it would cross the x-axis at negative 7 and 0. Okay, so it would cross. It would look something like this. All right, so looking at letter B, okay, I'm going to set both of those equal to 0. 2x minus 3 equals 0. And 5x plus 1 equals 0. So add 3 to both sides. 2x equals 3. X equals 3 halves. Same thing for this side. Subtract 1. 5x equals negative 1. Divide by 5. X equals negative 1/5. So your zeros there would be negative 1/5, comma 3 halves. Okay, and I always like to put mine in numerical order. I'm not sure why I didn't do that over here. So I'm just going to negative 7, comma 0. It's just a little personal preference of mine. All right, but what happens down here when you need to GCF or something? Well, that's fine. Just go ahead and do the greatest common factor. Both terms have an n in common, so I'm going to factor out an n. N minus 9 equals 0. So then I'm going to set up my 2 cases. N equals 0. N minus 9 equals 0. And solve. Add 9 to both sides. So my solution would be 0, 9. My root would be 0, 9. My 0 would be 0, 9. Okay, now press pause and try the next one on your own. Okay, so it has a 7x in common, so I'm going to GCF a 7x. Then I'm going to set my 7x equal to 0 and my x minus 4 equals 0. And solve both of those. X ends up being 0 because 0 divided by 7 is 0. Add 4. So your solutions would be 0, comma 4. All right. But what happens if you have to factor? Not a big deal. Just factor it. All right. So same thing. If you need a refresher on your factoring, go back to a couple videos before. Okay, 2 numbers that multiply to give us 6, add up to give us 5. That's going to be x plus 3 and x plus 2. And it's equal to 0. So I'm going to do x plus 3 equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0. Okay, subtract 3 and I get x equals negative 3. Subtract 2 and I get x equals negative 2. So your solution would be negative 3, comma negative 2. All right, B. y squared minus 9y plus 14. Two numbers that multiply to give us 14, add up to give us 9. Both signs are going to be the same. Both signs will be negative. Y minus 2, y minus 7 equals 0. So I'm going to do y minus 2 equals 0. Y minus 7 equals 0. Solve each one of those. Y ends up being 2, and y ends up being 7. So your solution would be 2, 7. All right. Moving on down to C. This one now has a negative in front of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to GCF a negative 1 out because I want my leading coefficient to be positive. X squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. Now I'm going to multiply to get negative 6, and my signs are going to be opposite because it's minus, and I'm going to subtract to get 1. So it's going to be x plus 2, x minus 3 equals 0. And don't forget the negative 1. Set each one of those equal to 0. X plus 2 equals 0. X minus 3 equals 0. And solve. Okay, subtract 2, x equals negative 2. Add 3, x equals 3. My solution would be negative 2, 3. Okay, press pause and try D on your own. All right, so that one I'm going to factor out a negative 1 again. Oh, and that should be equals to 0. Okay, so I want two numbers that multiply to give me negative 18, add up to give me positive, subtract to give me positive 3. Y plus 6, y minus 3. And it's equal to 0. Don't forget that negative 1 out front. Okay, set each one of those equal to 0. Y plus 6 equals 0. Y minus 3 equals 0. Y equals negative 6. Y equals 3. So your solution would be negative 6, 3. Remember to get those. All I did was solve for y. All right. All right. I'm going to GCF a 3, x squared minus 8x minus 15 equals 0 plus 15. So we want two numbers to multiply to give us a positive 15 and add up to give us a negative 8. Since the signs are going to be the same, we know that they're both going to be negative. They're both minus. So it's going to be 3, x minus 5, x minus 3. Okay. Then we're going to do x minus 5 equals 0. X minus 3 equals 0. X ends up being 5. When we add 5 over, add 3, x equals 3. So our solution is going to be 3, 5. All right. And now for F, the final one on this page. I'm going to GCF a 4. My greatest common factor would be a 4. I have 4 x squared plus 13x plus 42 equals 0. All right. Well, multiplies to give us 42 and adds up to give us 13. The signs are going to be the same. They're both going to be positive. X plus 6, x plus 7 equals 0. 4 times all that. So now I'm going to solve that. So I'm going to set each part equal to 0. So x plus 6 equals 0. X plus 7 equals 0. And solve. Subtract 6, I get x equals negative 6. Subtract 7, x equals negative 7. So my solution would be negative 7, negative 6. Okay, and that's where it's going to cross the x-axis. All right, so now factor and solve a quadratic equation when the leading coefficient is not a 1, when it's greater than 1. All right, Here's a QR code if you'd like to watch it. And let's do these last few examples. Okay, so I'm going to slide, divide, slide. So I'm going to slide a 3, x squared plus 11x plus 18 equals 0. When I factor that, I get x plus 2, x plus 9. All right, then I'm going to divide by 3. I get x plus 2/3, x plus 3. Can slide that 3 up to the front, so it's divided by 3, and then I'm going to slide the 3, and I get 3x plus 2, x plus 3. So I factored that, it's equal to 0, so now I need to solve it. So I'm going to set each one of those equal to 0. So 3x plus 2 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. All right, subtract 2. I get 3x equals negative 2. X equals negative 2/3. Okay, over here, subtract 3. X equals negative 3. So your solution would be negative 3 comma negative 2/3. Okay, and now for the last one of this example, this set. 8 times 15, I'm going to slide an 8. X squared minus 2x minus 120 equals 0. All right, so that's going to be negative 12, x minus 12, x plus 10. Now I'm going to divide by 8. X plus 3/2, x plus 5/4. Okay, and now I'm going to slide again. So 2x plus 3, 4x. Oh goodness, how did I mess that up? I was writing plus, it should have been minus right there. What's going on? Okay, 2x, x minus 3/2, so 2x minus 3, 4x plus 5, and they're equal to 0. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to solve each one of those sets of parentheses. So I have 2x minus 3 equals 0. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. 2x equals 3, x equals 3/2. Okay, now for the second one. 4x plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 5. 4x equals negative 5. X equals negative 5/4. So then your solution would be negative 5/4, comma 3/2. Okay. But what happens when you are using difference of two squares or a perfect square trinomial? That's what we're going to do next. Difference of two squares, same thing. Okay. You're going to factor this x minus 8, x plus 8 equals 0. Okay, set each one of those equal to 0. X minus 8 equals 0. X plus 8 equals 0. Okay, so add 8 over, x equals 8. Subtract 8, x equals negative 8. So your solution would be plus or minus 8. Or you can write it out negative 8 and positive 8. All right. Now, 9x squared equals 25. Remember, you always want this equal to 0. So I'm going to have to subtract that 25 over. So I get 9x squared minus 25. That's equal to 0. I just subtracted that 25 over. Now it's a difference of two squares. So that's going to be 3x plus 5, 3x minus 5. And it's equal to 0. All right. So solving each one of those, 3x plus 5 equals 0. 3x minus 5 equals 0. Solving each one of those, I just like to change colors a lot. Minus 5, 3x equals negative 5. X equals negative 5/3. Well, guess what this one's going to be? It's the exact same thing, but it's different signs. So it's going to be x equals 5/3. Because we add 5 over 3x equals 5 divided by 3. So your solution would be negative 5/3, comma, 5/3. All right, try C and D. Okay. All right. And GCF of 3, x squared minus 16 equals 0. X squared minus 16 is a perfect square. So I have x plus 4, x minus 4. Don't forget the 3. So when I solve that, I'm going to put x plus 4 equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0. And solve both of those. That looks a little tacky, so let's fix that up a little bit. Okay, so x plus 4, x minus 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. So x equals negative 4. Guess what the other one's going to be? Add 4 to both sides. X equals 4. So my solution would be plus or minus 4. All right, now the next one. I hope you've already completed it. I'm going to start by subtracting that 50, and I get 8x squared minus 50 equals 0. I'm going to GCF a 2, 4x squared minus 25. Okay, that's a difference of two squares now, so I'm going to go ahead and factor that. I have 2x plus 5, and 2x minus 5. And it's equal to 0. Okay, so setting each one of those equal to 0. Set each one of those equal to 0. 2x plus 5 equals 0. 2x minus 5 equals 0. And solve. Subtract 5. 2x equals negative 5. X equals negative 5/2. Well, guess what the other one's going to be? Exactly, x equals positive 5/2. Because it's the exact same equation, but the sign is different. So your solution would be negative 5/2, comma 5/2. Or the same thing as saying plus or minus 5/2, which I like that one better. I don't know why, I just like it better. All right, factor and solve a quadratic equation using the perfect square trinomial. Okay, so once again, there's QR codes. Now, x squared minus 2x plus 1, they're perfect square trinomials, so take the square root of the first one, x. And since the sign is plus, you know that both signs are going to be the same. Both signs are going to be negative, x minus and x minus. All right, so it's going to be 1, because what multiplies to give you 1 and adds up to give you negative 2? 1 and 1. So we have x minus 1 squared equals 0. So when we solve this, we just need to do it once. So x minus 1 equals 0. X equals 1. So your solution is going to be a 1. That's going to be a double root. What that means is when it is hitting the x-axis at 1, it's going to bounce and it's going to come up. So it's going to come down like a basketball and it's going to pop back up there at 1. All right, so that's a double root. Okay, so this one right here, 9x squared is a perfect square. 1's a perfect square. 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 3 is 6. That works out. So this is going to be 3x, and the signs are plus 1 squared is equal to 0. So solving that, 3x plus 1, subtract 1, x equals negative 1/3. So once again, that's going to be a double root at negative 1/3. You don't need to write it twice. You just need to write it once. All right. And right here's the practice for the next page. And be sure to do those and check your answers. Thank you.